Good morning and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Let me start with some home thoughts. I'm back onto DeLillo, who I consider one of the most powerful authors and commentators of our time. And, yesterday I took an excerpt from an interview in the Paris Review of Books, and Hervé in Kinshasa tweeted me back and said, what a powerful writer, and indeed he is. From white noise, something lurked inside the truth. From the angel Esmeralda, Don DeLillo, all human existence is a trick of light. We feel a private thrill, admit it, at the sight of beauty in flames. We wish to blast all the fine old things to oblivion and replace them with tasteless, identical structures. And then that took me to a piece I wrote last year where I said picking up the signal through the noise of our world in 2014 and 2015 is no easy thing. Quoting Don DeLillo, we're not witnessing the flow of information as much as pure spectacle, or information made sacred, ritually unreadable. The small monitors of the office, home and car become a kind of idolatry here, where crowds might gather in astonishment. Mao too, which I found very brilliant, and that is about the underlying conflict, revolves around the friction between the masses and the individuals who resist assimilation into a crowd-centric future. From the opening of the prologue, which is incredibly powerful, it's of these parents scanning this mass wedding looking for their daughter, where a Midwestern family must take their seats in the upper decks of the Yankee Stadium in order to witness the marriage of their daughter Karen, along with dozens of other members of the Mooney cult. The struggle is between the freedom associated with individuality and the oppression attributed to widespread conformity. That this ceremony, performed by an Eastern cult leader, takes place on a baseball field subtly suggests to the audience that the enemy is already at the gate. I've got a photograph of Don DeLillo that Esther Ojeda tweeted. Political reflections. Aung San Suu Kyi's opposition on Friday won a parliamentary majority from weekend polls that will allow it to elect a president and form a government in a historic shift in power from the army. It's a pretty seismic development, in fact. US bombers apparently flew near China-built island in South China Sea. This is the Pentagon. 2 US B-52 strategic bombers flew near artificial Chinese-built islands in the South China Sea this week. Contacted by Chinese ground controllers but continued their mission undeterred, the Pentagon said. Latest US patrol in the disputed South China Sea occurred in advance of President Obama's visit to the region next week to attend Asia-Pacific summits. The B-52s were on a routine mission in the South China Sea, taking off from and returning to Guam. We conduct B-52 flights in international airspace in that part of the world all the time, said the Pentagon. So far, no one has landed a punch. It's a little bit like shadow boxing, and that was the whole debate about the innocent passage, or FONOP. Bone, according to the Asia Times, that was a bone thrown to the China Hawks. The innocent passage, FONOP, threw a bone to the China Hawks at home and abroad, but leaves it up to the next president, presumably Hillary Clinton, the creatrix of the pivot, to decide on the frequency and intensity of these operations over the long term. Put up a photograph of US B-52s, and remember in December 2013, or was it in November 2013, they actually flew nuclear-armed B-52s through the ADIZ. And then I wrote about what I thought the pivot to Asia is all about the encirclement of China, the shrinking of its operating theatre, and then lighting the tinderbox that is the periphery, saying that the US probably, and this is probably Pentagon thinking, feels it has a decisive hard power advantage at this moment, and given that the trajectory is one of gradual erosion of that decisive advantage, it leads me to the view that the pivot has a logic and momentum of its own. Therefore, I see the US, and let's put that Pentagon in brackets, being increasingly determined to press its advantage. And one of the key elements of the pivot to Asia is the air-sea battle concept, and this is what, in that military parade in China, they specifically showed weapons that could block the blinding attack that's envisioned in the pivot to Asia. I think that's not really possible, but the blockade, what they talk about is distant blockade operations. You've got to own the sea if you're ever going to think about that. Heavy fog is blanketing Beijing. Apparently 2 suicide bombers hit Hezbollah's bastion in Lebanon. 43 people are killed. Hezbollah vowed to continue its fight against terrorists, warning of a long war against its enemies. That whole Syrian conflict is spilling over. Put up an image of these explosions, or the aftermath of the explosions I found on Twitter. US airstrike targets Mohammed Mwazi, ISIS terrorist known as Jihadi John. His nickname, Jihadi John, was given to him by a group of hostages who described him as part of an IS cell they named the Beatles because of their British accents. In February 2015, his identity was confirmed as Mohammed Mwazi, and I thought to myself, the Beatles, it's a sort of Bonnie and Clyde thing. Abdel Majed Abdel Bari El Jinni, lyricist Jin Jihadi John. I assume it's the same individual. The play on the word jinn or jinn. It's a supernatural creature in Islamic mythology. Quran says that the jinn are made of a smokeless and scorching fire, but are also physical in nature, being able to interfere physically with people and objects and likewise be acted upon. They are usually invisible to humans, but humans do appear clearly to jinn, so they can possess them. Jinn have the power to travel large distances at extreme speeds and are thought to live in remote areas, mountains, seas, trees, in the air, in their own communities. Like humans, jinn will also be judged on the Day of Judgment. And therefore he's probably he's at that very moment. Narendra Modi, the divisive manipulator who charmed the world. This is Pankaj Mishra in The Guardian. In 2005, when Narendra Modi was the chief minister of Gujarat, local police murdered a criminal called Sheikh Sohrabuddin in cold blood. At an election rally in 2007 for the ruling Hindu nationalist BJP, Modi assured his citizens that Sohrabuddin got what he deserved. What should be done, he asked, to a man found possessing illegal arms? The pumped-up crowd shouted back, Mari Nako, kill him, kill him. The lynch mob's cry was repeated in a village near Delhi last month as zealots beat to death a Muslim farmer they suspected wrongly of keeping beef in his house. While Modi makes a triumphant visit to the UK after more than a year as India's Prime Minister, the Hindu supremacists are, as the novelist Mukul Kesavan wrote last month, in full hunting mode, head up and howling. Powerful article. I couldn't resist this photograph of the protest artist Petra Pavlinsky, who this week set fire to the door of Russia's secret police headquarters. His protests are pretty interesting, the way he's trying to go head-to-head with the Russian state. Let's move on to international markets. The Dow Jones was weak, as was crude oil. Have a look at this chart that Holger posted. Currency markets, when I had a look last, euro was at 107.72, dollar index 98.67, Japanese yen 122.66, Swissy 1.0015, the pound 152, Aussie 0.7123, quite a rebound. India rupee 66.145, South Korean won 1162.22, the Rial 376.53, Egyptian pound 783, South African rand 14.2868. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart. It looks a little bit tired now, having got above 99. Euro dollar, it bounced twice off a sub 107 level, quite hard the second time. Commodity markets, look at this Bloomberg Commodity Index, hits its lowest level since 1999. I wrote about this in November last year when I said the commodity supercycle is dead in the water. Glencore shares, which have had a good rally, but now back below £1 for the first time in a month, heavily correlated to commodity prices. Gold 1082.31 continues to soften. Holger again, WTI drops to the lowest since August. Interesting piece in Bloomberg, why cocaine farmers are getting into chocolate instead. Cocoa futures have surged 39% in the past 3 years, which is one of, according to Bloomberg, the Bloomberg Commodity Index, which doesn't include cocoa, has tumbled 40% in the same period. Let's move on to Africa. The Economist, and on its top, it's talking about a vehicle that's driving around in Uganda, is a sign which reads simply, "Vote Museveni, President now, President forever." What better slogan for Yoweri Museveni, Uganda's president since he took power after a coup in 1985. A staunch ally of the West, he introduced multi-party elections in a country torn apart by Idi Amin. But he has been in power for almost 30 years and seems determined to stay for longer. In February, Uganda will hold elections. They will be the most fiercely fought in the country in decades, and will probably not end with an unimpeachable result. He's going to win by hook or by crook. The resolution against Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to deploy a team to Burundi to work with the government, African Union and other partners to develop options to address political and security concerns remains very fragile. The EU has launched a $2 billion emergency fund for Africa to combat migration. That's all about keeping the migrants within their borders. So it's probably heavily security related. Le Monde Afrique Angola, after the petrol euphoria, the repression in French. Rafael Marques de Moraes, 40 years on from independence, Angola still lacks freedom. This was because it was the 40th year of independence on the 11th of November. In the face of President José Eduardo dos Santos' 36-year rule, one slogan has emerged among Angola's informed youth: Liberdade ya, freedom now. Johannesburg and Pretoria had record temperatures for a second consecutive day on Wednesday. This is all the El Nino effect. 39.8 degrees on Tuesday, 14.3 degrees Celsius Wednesday. It's in the grip of a drought. Put up a photograph of the sunset I took on November the 1st last year in Johannesburg, and another one of Kyalami racetrack in Johannesburg as well. The South African All Shares down 2,553 points since November the 4th, but it's still up 4.59% year to date. Dollar versus Rand back towards record lows, headed lower. Jamie at Reuters, right back Kwacha, this was yesterday, the Zambian currency soared 10%. Have a look at the chart. Egyptian pound hanging on by a thread at 783.01. Egyptian stock market down 23.75% year to date. Nigerian all share down 16.9% year to date. Interesting piece about Ghana. IMF straitjacket leaves little room for election budget in Ghana, and I think increasingly, because the tide has turned and it's now more difficult to run big overdrafts and spend everything on recurrent expenditure, people are taking a much closer look that the IMF will play a bigger role, and this intervention in Ghana will be surely the template. Ghana has little room to produce an election budget on Friday as it sticks to spending restrictions imposed by the IMF to help an economy in crisis. Finance Minister Seth Terkper is set to present a 2016 budget that targets a fiscal deficit of about 5.3%. from 7.3% this year. Been a bit of a recovery in the currency, a lot to do with the IMF intervention. So far, Ghana appears to be sticking to its fiscal consolidation. The deficit was 4.7% of GDP in the first 8 months of the year, compared with a target of 4.8%. Public debt was at 62% of GDP in July. We should be cautiously optimistic, being mindful of election pressures. We expect the economy to expand by an average of 5% in 2016. The Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down 12.5% this year. Mozambique hit by commodity price fall. Financial Times. Cranes tower over buildings across Maputo, from new office blocks to a huge Chinese-owned 5-star hotel. Industrial drills and grinders add to the cacophony emanating from the city's increasingly traffic-clogged streets. The capital of Mozambique bears all the hallmarks of a city in the throes of a boom, but beneath the surface is an economy under stress, hit by the collapse in commodity prices and global economic volatility that is blighting some of Africa's brightest prospects. It will be tough, says Salima Abdullah, a prominent businessman, bemoaning the recent marked slowdown in economic activity. Illustrating the travails Mozambique faces, the IMF last week announced it agreed to loan the government $286 million. It still forecasts growth of 6.3% for Mozambique this year. Mozambique is currently experiencing an external shock associated with the drop in commodity prices, lower growth in trading partners, and delays in investment associated with large natural resource projects. Metical has depreciated sharply, falling about 30% against the dollar. If they pay very slowly, but it affects all the systems because it's like a cascade. Talk about the controversial tuna bomb as well, which wasn't helpful. The knock-on effect is visible around the capital. Hotels that were until recently enjoying 90% or higher occupancy rates are now around half full. Rents and property prices have tumbled. It's difficult for some developers to fund the buildings. Previously you could secure 70% off plan. Now you can secure 5 to 10% off plan. It's an important learning curve for Mozambique, but it's not always going to go up. I'll put up a photograph of the sunset at Maputo Harbour a few years ago when we visited. Take you back to the article I wrote over the weekend. Wow, what a ride. And I concluded by saying, in the immediate term, and after some stomach-churning turbulence, we have sight of the landing strip. And I was saying it now behoves the banks to bring the interest rate down as quickly as they raised it. Yesterday I paid a visit to the Cabinet Secretary, and I said, I've got to take a photograph of you behind your desk. And then I said, I'm going to call you the interest rate wizard, which I did. Patrick Jirogi says, he's the central bank governor, saying, I'm confident we will execute a soft landing of interest rates, and he's done a good job adjusting to the circumstances. I'm expressing that optimism, that confidence that commercial bank rates will fall soon. And what do I mean by soon? I'm talking of in the context of the month. And you will recall that on the 7th of October, I put out a note saying buy 1-year Treasury bills. They were at 23%. If you haven't seen my interview with Bob Collymore after the results, after his first half results on 5th of November, please take a look. Because the share price, as I said, I was quite fulsome. Bob said you were quite fulsome. But the reason I was fulsome is I could see that they were going to produce a good response. And you've had an 11.84% rally since those results were released. US and other Western nations pledged to help Kenya fight graft, saying Kenya faced a corruption crisis. Ambassadors from 11 mainly Western countries issued a statement to help return stolen assets to Kenya and impose travel restrictions on those responsible for graft. People should not be allowed to enjoy the ill-gotten gains of corruption in London, Geneva, New York, or anywhere else, and we have a responsibility to ensure that those assets are returned to their rightful owners, the Kenyan people. That was Christian Turner. The statement was co-signed by the US, Canada, Finland, France, Germany, Japan, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and Switzerland. There is now a general atmosphere where grand theft is normal, says John Githongo. There's a looting spree and clearly there's no fear of persecution. Kenya shilling at 102.30. It's behaved rather well as interest rates have come lower. Nairobi all share up 5.04% since the 4th of November, and that's coincided with the Safaricom move. NSE 20 is up 2.272% since the 3rd of November. Kenya court orders reopening of rights groups' bank accounts. This was to Muhuri and Haki Africa, whose bank accounts were frozen. The judge says the freezing of accounts was unconstitutional, illegal, and in violation of the petitioner's fundamental rights to freedom to own property. Family Bank says they plan to raise as much as 15 billion shillings through a sale of a stake to a private equity PE firm. So that's, of course, they had a cutback on their bond issue. Black and white, Kenya's criminal racket in Somalia. The illicit trade in sugar and charcoal is, according to one diplomat, shocking and inimical to national security. Loaders, traders, and intelligence officials told JFJ that an estimated 150,000 tons of illicit sugar comes into Kenya via Kismayo each year, 3,000 tons a week, and saying that KDF and Jubilant forces control the port and are levying a $2 per bag charge on imported sugar. Big scandal, of course, in athletics, and Daily Maverick is saying two of the countries which are likely to come under scrutiny are Kenya and Ethiopia. Currently 15 Kenyan athletes are on the IAAF's banned list, including the Boston Marathon runner Rita Jepto. The country's Olympic Committee chairman Kipchoge Keino said that the government has failed to tackle the country's doping problems. I've tried to reach government officials to agree on how to act, but I don't get appointments. I make calls that are unanswered. We even tried to convince senior government officials to attend these meetings, but they instead delegate to junior officers. And an arrest warrant finally has been issued against Dubai Bank's founder, Mr. Zubedi. So plenty going on, plenty of noise, picking up the signal, not always that easy. Once again, thank you for stopping by, wishing you a wonderful weekend.